Fleeing raiders, he hit a derelict ship. The desert sun beat down like a hammer on anvil, turning the sand beneath Kale's boots into something between liquid fire and solid stone. His breath came in ragged gasps as his legs pumped across the dunes, each footfall taking him further from the screams and the smell of burning fuel. Behind him, the raiders were coming. He could hear the engines of their stripped-down bikes cutting through the wasteland like knives through silk, their shouts carrying on the hot wind that rose from the cracked earth. 3 of them had spotted him fleeing the settlement of Oasis Junction, and they'd given chase, without hesitation. The Crimson Riders didn't take kindly to anyone who escaped their mercy, even someone as insignificant as a water hauler. Kale risked a glance over his shoulder. The motorcycles were maybe 200 meters back, kicking up massive plumes of rust-colored dust. The lead rider stood up on his seat, one hand on the throttle, the other raising something that looked like a rifle. The sun glinted off the barrel. He had maybe 30 seconds before they caught him. That's when he saw it. At first, Kale thought it was a mirage, one of those phantom shapes that the desert heat conjured to mock desperate men. But as he ran toward it, the shape became clearer, more solid, more real. It was a massive freighter, half buried in sand, its hull streaked with rust and time. The ship tilted at an angle, one side sunk deeper into the dunes than the other, as though the desert was slowly swallowing it whole. A ramp. There was a boarding ramp extending from the starboard side, its surface smooth metal that gleamed dully in the harsh light. The ship must have crash-landed here years ago, abandoned by whoever had flown it, left to rot in the unforgiving heat. Kale had heard stories of such derelicts scattered across the wastes, remnants of the old world, before the collapse, before the raiders, before everything fell apart. He redirected his trajectory toward the ramp, his muscles screaming in protest. The sound of the motorcycle engines grew louder, angrier, the riders shouting now in excited anticipation of the kill. Kale's legs pumped harder. The sand fought him with every step, clawing at his feet, trying to drag him down into its depths. The ramp was 30 meters away. 20. 10. A bullet whined past his head so close he felt the displacement of air, felt it pluck at a strand of his hair. Another kicked up a spray of sand to his left. He was almost there, almost. His boot hit the metal ramp. The friction was wrong. His foot slipped, and he stumbled, going down hard on his knees. Pain shot through his legs. Above him, the dark opening of the cargo hold loomed like the mouth of some ancient beast. The ramp extended upward at a steep angle, disappearing into shadow. The motorcycles were maybe 50 meters away now. "Get up!" a voice screamed from inside the ship. Female. Sharp. Commanding. "Get in, you ugly piece of meat." Kale didn't question it. He didn't have time for questions. He scrambled to his feet and lunged up the ramp, his hands grabbing for purchase on the slick metal surface. His boots scraped and slipped. The roar of the motorcycle engines filled his ears, mixing with the scream of his own desperate breathing. A hand reached out from the shadows, small, blue-skinned, wrapped in worn fabric, and grabbed his collar, yanking him forward with surprising strength. Kale stumbled through the cargo bay entrance, his eyes blinded by the sudden darkness after the brilliant desert light. Behind him, the sound of the motorcycles reached a fever pitch. "Seal it," the woman's voice commanded. There was a hydraulic hiss, a grinding of gears that hadn't moved in who knew how long. Kale spun around to see the ramp beginning to rise. Through the narrowing opening, he caught a glimpse of the lead raider leaning forward over his bike, face twisted in fury as he realized his prey was escaping. The raider gunned his engine and turned sharply, trying to line up a shot at the closing ramp. 2 of his companions followed, their bikes cutting sharp arcs through the sand, but they were running out of time. The ramp continued its stuttering ascent, its ancient motors struggling against years of rust and neglect. One of the raiders threw something. A grenade, maybe, or a makeshift explosive. It bounced off the ramp with a harsh metallic ring just as the opening sealed shut with a final, conclusive clang. The explosion came a second later, muffled by the thick hull plating, sending a tremor through the cargo bay that made dust rain down from the ceiling. Kale fell to his knees, his legs finally giving out now that the adrenaline was fading. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, a light flickered on, a pale, sickly yellow that came from some ancient panel on the wall. In that stuttering glow, Kale finally got a good look at his rescuer. She was shorter than him, perhaps 5.5 feet tall, with deep blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her hair was long and black, pulled back with strips of cloth that looked like they'd been salvaged from a dozen different sources. She wore a patchwork armor of metallic plates and leather, some of it intact, much of it scarred and dented. One of her eyes was cybernetic, glowing a faint green, and it was fixed on him with an expression that mingled annoyance and exhaustion. "Thank you," Kale said, still breathing hard. "I don't know who you—" "Quiet," she interrupted. She held up one finger, cocking her head as though listening to something. The cybernetic eye swiveled, scanning the cargo bay walls. "Give it a minute. Sometimes they try to board. Sometimes they don't." They waited in silence, broken only by the distant rumble of the motorcycle engines outside and the occasional groan of the ship's ancient structure settling in the sand. Minutes passed like hours. Eventually, the sound of the engines faded, becoming fainter and fainter until it disappeared entirely into the vast quiet of the desert. The woman lowered her hand and let out a long, controlled breath. "They're gone," she said. "For now." "What is this place?" Kale asked, looking around the cargo bay. The space was vast, stretching back into darkness that his eyes couldn't quite penetrate. The air smelled of rust and sand and something else, something organic and sour. "This," the woman said, "is the Meridian's last hope. Or it was once. Freighter. Colonial expedition ship, actually. Crashed here about 15 years ago when the engines went out. The captain tried to glide her in, but she came in hot and never quite managed to take off again." "And you've been here all this time?" She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You could say that. I'm Kess, by the way, pilot of this dead bird, until she decided to actually be useful for once." She extended her hand. Kale took it, noting the calluses on her palm, the strength in her grip.
Kale.
Water hauler. Or I was, until those raiders decided to make an example of the settlement. Kess nodded slowly, her expression darkening. "The Crimson Riders."
"Yeah, I've heard about them."
"Bastards control about half the territory in this sector now." She turned away, gesturing for him to follow. "Come on. We need to get below deck. If they come back with reinforcements, we want to be deeper in the ship. Harder to dig us out if they don't know where to dig." As they walked into the darkness of the Meridian's last hope, Kale thought about the twist of fate that had saved his life. A derelict ship, half buried in the sand. A pilot with nowhere else to go. And him, just a man running, with no destination in mind except away. But now, in the belly of this dead vessel, surrounded by the echoes of a past civilization, Kale wondered if perhaps the desert had guided him here for a reason. Perhaps this wasn't an ending at all. Perhaps it was a beginning.